Hi, my name is Winsley, and welcome to my video diving into screenshots I took from the third gameplay stream covering Ways of War, which is the next expansion for Age of Wonders 4 and is coming out on November 5th. Just like I've done with all the previous gameplay streams by the devs, I went through and took screenshots of all the interesting numbers and mechanics that only popped up for a few seconds so that we can look at them closely together. I will have timestamps below, so if you want to jump to any particular topic or concept, you can do so. I will also be posting these images to the official Age of Wonders 4 forum, so if you want to look at them with me, you can use the link in the description below. Important disclaimer, a lot of the numbers we will be looking at today are from relatively early versions of Age of Wonders 4, so they will likely change at some point in development, and we recently heard from the developers that there will be at least 2 more DLCs for Age of Wonders 4, and they mentioned in the last dev stream that they had ideas for things they could do in future DLCs. So it seems likely that if this season pass, if the next few DLCs do well, that we will see more development in the near future. Now, without further ado, I think we're ready to start diving into some of these screenshots. The first two that we have here, Vigilante Knights and Cult of Personality, are two new society traits that you can put on a faction during the faction creator at the beginning of a new map, and they are unlocked in the Pantheon tree. You're only going to be able to get access to these if you own Ways of War, and you have a couple Pantheon points that you can use to unlock them. Vigilante Knights basically says that you can roleplay as mercenary that goes around the map clearing out bounties. When you clear out a bounty, you get plus 50% gold and plus 50% mana, as well as an additional 100 Imperium on top of that. That 100 Imperium is massive because if you're able to find these bounties quickly, you're going to be able to get more Imperium than most other factions will be in the early part of the game, or really all throughout the game, because if you're playing a regular single player game, the AI does really like to make bounties, and that'll give you a lot of options to interact with this mechanic. It also says that your starting units gain +1 rank, which is really interesting because they did take out a lot of the things that boost your rank. Um, at the beginning of the game, but this is just saying the units that you start with will have an additional rank, so it's not everything that you recruit after that point, which means if you lose these units, then you lose that starting bonus basically. The cult of personality is a really interesting one because I think Avox was saying there's basically no way that you can balance this one for multiplayer. It's just too good, and that he suspects multiplayer servers like the one I run over the weekend will ban the society trait from their games as soon as it comes out, as soon as we get access to it on November 5th. And I have to say, when I look at this, it does seem a little bit too strong compared to everything else you can get access to from the society traits. This thing basically says it's a hero focused society, and units in an army without a hero will suffer -10 morale, but that seems pretty insignificant and like something that you can plan around if you're able to get 2 heroes at the very beginning of the game, which you are. You're able to have your ruler, and because you have +1 hero cap, you're going to have a second hero, which you can either put in the same stack with your other hero, or you can allow him to lead armies. The fact that you can get +3 hero cap for Pantheon heroes is negligible for the multiplayer community because Pantheon heroes can't appear in multiplayer, but it is really nice in single player if you want to have like 4 dragon rulers in an and single playthrough. You can do that with this society pick. I kind of I'm curious if there's a higher chance that the Pantheon heroes can occur if you take this, because it's not listed in the description, but I could see that being somewhat changed, because when I made my video trying to spawn in Dragon Rulers, I had a little bit of trouble getting that event to fire. It took a long time for me to just keep reloading maps and playing through to get that to trigger. The other interesting thing about this that we haven't gone over yet is the fact that heroes gain an extra skill point whenever they gain a renown level. So that means, generally speaking, people who take this society trait will have more heroes on the map. They will be a higher level, and Furthermore, they will have more skill points, not just from the fact that they're able to level up their heroes more, but from the fact that when they complete their renown objectives, they get those bonuses and an extra skill point. So they're just going to have access to a pretty absurd level of skill points relative to everybody else in the game. And I think that could probably get out of hand pretty quickly when we're looking at the new hero skill tree level up system. But it's also a system I haven't gotten to play around with, and this is something that I think I would actually like to see in a game one or two times before I say I want to outright ban it, because sometimes things look imbalanced and they're actually fine. The balance it works out in the end, and sometimes it's the other way around. Sometimes things look balanced, and then when you get into it, things are can be kind of broken in funny, silly ways. The next set of images we have here have to do with an intrigue event. The mysterious prisoner aftermath, I think, is the flavor of intrigue event that they labeled rebellion. There was four where somebody basically comes from another plane of existence, like the Reaper, I think, is a shadow one. There's like a Baylor from a chaos place that can come in and take over. But this one is like the generic one that doesn't require affinity on the enemy that you're fighting in order for it to be triggered. This one, I think, is affecting Tempest, and this Draconian was a prisoner essentially. You get a little bit of Imperium from freeing him, and then you get to pick one of these three choices. The first one is you just accept the quest, and then when you complete the quest, I think you can either put this guy in charge of the enemy empire or something along those lines. I know that when it came to the Baylor specifically, you could either side with him and become evil and try and take on the rest of the map. You could, I think, return the other ruler to being in power, and then there was one where you just accept the contract, and I think you're just at war with both of those rulers. So I'm not really sure what the end of this event chain would look like. I don't think they got to that in stream, but we know that you can accept it, the quest at this point. You can either decline it and the investigation ends and the current effects will remain, which means basically um, Tempest will still be on the map, and I think there might be a new empire that gets spawned in once you free this person, but I'm not entirely sure how that mechanic works. And the third option is you just outright decline the quest and capture the person that you had freed from the free city. And that will make it so that the ruler who has the rebellion, who has this intrigue event happening, will like you a little bit more. So if you didn't want to fight them, if you wanted some extra like relationship, you can try and maybe move them towards an alliance or just make it so that they're just less likely to want to come and fight you and declare war on you. So we know that this can only happen in single player games. As you can imagine, it wouldn't be very much fun if something like this was targeting your empire and all of a sudden your ruler gets swapped out for an entirely different ruler, or you just get like knocked out of the game that way. So this is, yeah, like I said earlier, only for single player games, but it's not what I imagined when I read the word intrigue, and I think a lot of people were expecting assassinations and sabotage things that you could use in multiplayer games. Eventually, it would be interesting to see something like that added, but I don't think they currently have any plans to do that. Another thing I wanted to tackle relatively early here was a little correction that my friend Zombie had for me on Discord. When I was talking about some screenshots from the official Discord, I didn't quite get the details right between the changes on champion rulers and wizard king rulers. This is images of what the things should do in the upcoming version of the game that we're going to be, or the version that we're going to be seeing on November 5th. Mortal champions will now gain plus 20% experience. That's a really big change from the fact that they used to give plus 20 experience to all non-hero units. So it's taking that boost away from your just general army and putting it on your one ruler. Your ruler, the mortal champion himself, will get more experience and be able to get those skill points that I was mentioning earlier even quicker because of this interaction. and they took away the fact that the champion would get extra gold and stability and draft. So it's less about making your other units stronger here. I think there's still a lot of support in the level up options for the champion, but it looks like this uh, this part of the champion is supposed to make him a relatively strong unit, and as you might imagine, one of the best things you have in your army for actually fighting. As a result of getting more experience, they're going to be like, yeah, the champion of the people. It makes a lot of sense from a thematic sense why they changed it to plus 20% experience on this unit. Now, the Wizard Kings are going to be getting extra mana from all conduits, and they're going to get a channeling ritual, which I think is something that should be able to get upgraded into something like Overchannel through the level ups, but we haven't seen a Wizard King's options yet, and I don't exactly know what a channeling ritual is, but if I had to guess, it's probably similar to Overchannel, and maybe it isn't a free action, maybe it's like a full action or a single action to do something similar, if not pretty much the exact same thing as the Overchannel ability. Now, if we go down here and we compare this to what they used to get extra mana on all of their cities. I think getting 2 mana for each conduit could be worse in general, because I think this boost could get applied to the city structures like the shrine. Um, but if you really focus on conduits, this might end up resulting in more mana more quickly, but that will make it harder to boost your cities up and make them effective economic centers. They'll just be there for mana. It sounds like if you take the Wizard King and you really lean into that whole conduit interaction that we see here. The other thing they changed is you don't get the casting points for every two levels on the Wizard King, which is a pretty big change. That was one of the best things about a Wizard King. I think the best thing was the overchannel ability, but the fact that you had extra casting points meant that you could use some higher level spells more often in combats, which could really change the way that combat was going. The next set of images that we have here have to do with the Dragon Lord ruler type, and I think while the first two have to do with the general Dragon Lord uh, picks that you can take at any level, most of the time that Avoxel spent looking at this was actually looking at the signature skill options that you have for the Dragon Rulers, like the Shadow aspect and Order aspect and Astral aspect. These aspects are the things that you get at the um, when you get to your 4th level and you can pick your first signature skill. And then he also spent a bit of time going over what you get at level 8. That would be these transformations. At level 12, I think you get the breaths. Don't worry, we'll go over this in more detail. So I just wanted to mention that we have the breaths, and then I think he showed off 1 or 2 of the things that you get at level 16, like the elders, like the Elder of Astral, the Elder of Chaos, or the Elder of Materium. All right, let's go back to the top of this list of Dragon Lord screenshots to actually really dive into this. The defensive swipe is a tail swipe ability that guarantees weakened and puts the unit in defensive mode. I think the base version is something that can hit multiple units in front of it, and it used to be upgraded so that you can make it so that when you do that ability it would stun and push them back. I believe that is now in the displacing swipe ability, so you can either choose displacing swipe to displace units up to 2 hexes and have a 60% chance to stun them, or you can take a more defensive um, tail swipe, which I think would inflict the 2 weakening on more than 1 unit. I think it should hit the in a cone or the 3 hexes in front of a unit when it takes this attack. Now we can dive into the shadow aspect, which says that you get a little bit of HP, a little bit of armor, a little bit of resistance. All of the aspects give the same amount. I want to say the primal dragon transformation is a bit different, but like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, a lot of these numbers are very likely to change, and Avoxel has been tweaking them a bit recently. I think he said that he took the HP boost that primals get down, or he took the amount of defense and resistance down from what we saw in this screenshot, but it could be that those numbers jump up again when we get closer to November 5th. The HP resistance and armor are pretty negligible, and we're going to skip past that for the most part when we're looking at these aspects and transformations. The main selling point for this is that all attacks will apply weaken for 3 turns, and this effect is doubled for non-repeating abilities. I think means that you'll give 2 stacks of weakened on non-repeating abilities. You'll also get the ability to take soul draining strikes and frost strikes, which I think is not the adepts but the initiate of shadow options that you would get as a wizard king, as a mortal champion, or maybe even as a no, I don't think you would get that option as an eldritch sovereign. I think eldritch sovereigns have some unique choices, kind of like the dragons as well. The order aspect is going to give you basically 2 resistance to all adjacent friendly units. So you want to hang out around the dragon, and he can be kind of like the shining beacon dragon that protects all of his friendly units that are nearby. Once again, this is from the initiate. These options are the things that you'd get for the initiate of order. And the astral aspect is going to make it so that your breath attacks deal more damage, and your breath attacks have a 90% chance of inflicting sundered resistance, which, if I remember correctly, will allow your breath attacks to deal more damage, because I think all of the breath weapons are magical, unless maybe there's one that does physical damage. I'm just trying to remember what the Materium Dragon does off the top of my head, and I think it might have been somehow a physical breath. I did just look into it, and it looks like the rust breath, the Materium breath, does do physical damage, and in that situation, sundering resistance on your targets won't be helpful for your dragon to deal more damage. But the neat thing about a dragon's breath attack is that you can then follow it up with other units that deal magic damage. So even if your dragon isn't dealing magic damage, I think this will help you get a lot more value out of magic damage, and it seems like a generally pretty good aspect. The chaos aspect, by comparison, doesn't seem quite as good. It does seem neat that you can get plus 20% crit chance on your dragon through this source, but I don't know if that's going to translate to more damage on average than plus 30% damage. And then when you combine that with the sundered resistance, it does seem like it's slightly weaker. But what I do like about it is it does really lean into the what the Chaos Affinity is known for. It's known for having higher crit chance and higher crit damage, so that when you do get that dice roll, it's very good for you. And then when you don't, it kind of feels bad because you put a lot of points into trying to do more damage, but you didn't get the dice roll you needed. So it almost feels like wasted points. Now the nature aspect, when I was looking at this, I kind of felt similarly to the chaos aspect. I was feeling similar feelings about the nature aspect as I was about the chaos aspect. It seems like it's a little bit harder to use and trigger, and when it this one does trigger, I don't know if I love the fact that it's giving 10 temporary hit points. I think some status effects might be nice instead of the healing. The healing is kind of not a lot. It's a little tiny heal. It's like a just enough to take care of one tiny attack off of a relatively weak unit. But I think if you combine that probably with some other aspects or other things involved with the nature dragon's level ups, or the things you can get in his signature skill, this could probably get to be pretty useful. The fact that it's on non-base attack abilities means that your claw will not be able to trigger this healing effect, but I think your breath weapon should be able to. And then if you take things like lightning evocation, I believe that should allow you to heal the is it friendly units? Yeah, he grants a friendly unit in 3 hex of the target just 10 HP. It's just one friendly unit gets a little bit of hit points, which could be nice, but I think in a lot of situations that's not going to be nearly as good as the astral aspect or like the order aspect. I think the order aspect is just generally a lot easier to get value out of. The Materium aspect was something that a voxel mentioned is going to get better, uh, or that he's recently made better in their internal build. The build that they started this playthrough on it didn't have the charge resistance. It just had extra damage on retaliation attacks and opportunity attacks. And I think generally speaking, the Materium aspect is similar to the nature aspect and the chaos aspect in that it's a little bit harder to get value out of. The extra charge resistance is going to be good. Um, but I don't know if it's going to be enough to make the Materium aspect as competitive as some of these others. I think it might need something extra, something different to make it a little bit more competitive. So now we're moving into transformations. These are the things you get at level 8. The first one is the astral transformation, and this says that you're going to become an ethereal, which I think makes it so that you are weak to lightning, but you have some other resistances, and you can no longer become bleeding or poisoned, or maybe a few other status effects. I don't remember all of the things you get with the ethereal tag off the top of my head, but the next thing in here is quite unique and quite different. It's the fact that you can give your dragon a ranged attack is pretty cool, because that means when your breath attack is on cooldown, you don't have to run your guy into melee range to try and get some damage off of your dragon. The fact that it's only ranged 4 makes me feel like it's not something that I'm going to want to use a lot in the current version of that ability. But if it was able to get up to like range 5 through distant evocation, or maybe start at range 5 and go up to range 6, I could see myself using this a lot more as a dragon. And I think when you consider how they are changing taunt to be like range 4, the fact that this is range 4 kind of will put the dragon in a tricky spot, kind of a dangerous spot if taunt doesn't get changed too significantly from what we last saw in, I think, the last dev stream. Now, the nature dragon will give you the plant and fey tags as well as feygrowth. This one's pretty unique. This one's pretty different because I don't remember a lot of them doing something new, something unique like the feygrowth mechanic. A lot of people wanted some fey dragons, and I think this is the first time they allowed you to get that unit type on the dragons, and it's cool that it's combined with plants. This will give you, I think, some minus blight resistance, which I think combined with plants is going to make this dragon very weak to blight damage, which is cool. It's interesting. I hadn't considered that until just now. You get some extra spirit resistance, which isn't bad. Now I need to look up plants and ethereals up in the database just to see what they get you. Um, let's see, living vines will have the plant tag, won't you? So the plant is, yeah, you get some lightning resistance. You're slightly weaker to blight and fire, and you get forest walk. Wow, okay. And then ethereal. Let's see what's something that's ethereal. Phantasm warriors, I think, are ethereal. So we go here, and we can see that ethereal units get a little bit of extra defense, but they are weak to lightning. Okay, that's all good information to have. Um, but yeah, like we mentioned earlier, the nature transformation gives you this new feygrowth mechanic, and this says at the end of the unit's turn, you will create obscuring flora in the adjacent hexes, which I think when you combine that with the fey, when you're standing in obscuring, I think you get the ability to dispel status effects. I believe that's what Fey Guile says, and that's very strong. That's going to be very, very nice. It may look like at a glance that this is not as good as getting ethereal and cosmic bolts, but I think it's actually a lot better because not only will the dragon be able to interact with Feyguile, which allows it to get a random positive status effect at the end of its turn, but by generating that flora, you'll be able to allow other units with Feyguile. Say you take Tome of the Mist and you get Feyguile on all of your guys, then all of your guys will be able to interact with this flora that the dragon is just generating as it moves across the map. Now, I don't think we'd gotten screenshots of the Adept of Nature skills that you can pick when you take the Adept of Nature signature skill. The Withering Decay is going to make it so that your base attacks have a 90% of applying decaying. That's not amazing on the dragon because that means basically you have to get really close and use your claws, unless somehow the cosmic bolts count as a base attack. Oh, and look at that, they do count as a base attack. So that might be an interesting way to um, allow you to, keep your dragon at a safer distance and apply things like decaying on base attacks. And then the adaptive armor is the other choice you can pick, which will make it so that once per turn, this unit gains regeneration when they're hit by an attack. So as long as they're taking in some damage, they will get some regeneration to bring back some of their HP passively. That's pretty good on dragons because you kind of want them to get to their dragon rage to lose enough HP to get their dragon rage, and then by regenerating, you'll keep them a little bit safer, keep them on the map a little bit longer. Now, I did mention earlier that the primal dragon's numbers here sound like they might be getting nerfed a little bit, but the main idea behind the primal dragon is that they don't change their type into ethereal or plant or fey. They're going to stay a dragon, but they're going to get some better stats as a result, as well as natural regeneration. So I think they will just regenerate up to the HP they had at the beginning of the fight, using a mechanic similar to this regeneration here. I think it's just going to give you one stack of regeneration at the end of your turn. Or if you don't already have regeneration, I think it just gives you one stack of regeneration at the end of your turn, healing you up to, I believe, the number that you started at. There's some similar interactions in game, and I think the trolls, like for example, they can't heal up past the HP that they have at the beginning of a fight. Voxel recently changed those numbers. We did get a quick screenshot of the chaos transformation, but they didn't go over this in too much detail. It seems pretty self-explanatory. You'll get the infernal fiend unit type, which is like the Balor. I think it'll have fire resistance. It'll be weak to a couple different things, as well as having a few immunities. Having vicious killer and terrifying aurora basically is saying that they're going to interact with the enemy's morale. So this is like the crit part of the chaos build. This is the part of making the enemy lose morale and not want to fight you, kind of like the tome of mayhem, I think it is. That's the one that can inflict misfortune and make the enemy very sad very quickly. I think the shadow affinity has another one. Tome of doom herald, I think, also reduces morale, and they're pretty powerful together. Now, did we see debilitating or in chaos empowerment before? Something about that seems familiar. I think we have seen chaos empowerment at the very least. The shadow transformation says that it'll turn your dragon into an undead, and they'll also get life steal. I think all undead, actually no, the zombies don't have life steal because they're decaying, but a lot of the undead units in game do have life steal. I know that if you whiteborn a unit, then they'll also get life steal, and that will allow them to um, yeah, stay in the battle a little bit longer. You can be a little bit more aggressive if you have life steal on your units. The slain units transform into decaying zombies, except in water battles, is probably the best aspect of the shadow transformation. This is going to make it so that your enemies are just going to have to deal with a lot more actions, a lot more often. And if they take out an enemy, they have to take it out again. I'm not sure how this would work with the bone horror, because the bone horror spawns in, I want to say, a pole arm when it gets to a certain HP level. I'm curious if both when the bone horror dies and when that skeleton dies, if you can get more zombies, because that should be very efficient in terms of action economy. But I don't know yet. I'm definitely going to have to play around with that. Next, we have the breaths. The first one that we have here is infernobreath. This says that it's gonna give HP to the unit. Actually, all of these give plus 30 HP to the dragons, and it will increase the size of the breath attack, I think, by like one more hex in front of it. It'll be able to reach one more hex in front of it, and it will. This one, Inferno Breath, will make it so that you get fire damage if you're not a Chaos Dragon, which I think the Chaos Dragon will be all fire damage up until this point, if unless there's something that I'm missing. It will also make it so that the breath does 30% more damage, it always inflicts burning, and it sets affected hexes on fire. The setting affected hexes on fire can be really nice if you've got things like the cleansing flame or ghost fire, because I think fire now will turn into different types of fire if you have access to those things, and that's going to generally be very nice. I think the cleansing flame will be great for keeping your own units uh, relatively healthy. I think that dispels things. I don't think it heals, but I think it dispels. And then the ghost fire could be good for um, hurting enemies that you may want to freeze. I think burning it does counter frozen, but ghost fire is an interaction that allows you to use fire and frost at the same time. Now, frost breath, similar, it gives you extra HP, increases the size of the breath, makes it so that it's part frost damage. But the main thing here is now you can have a 90% chance to freeze enemies, and if that's unsuccessful, they're slowed. I'm not sure what the base dragon, the base shadow dragon's breath weapon will do exactly, because I don't think we've seen that, but I have to imagine it has a lower chance to freeze or no chance to freeze. I think it used to be like a 30% to freeze on the older versions of the game, but that could be a bit different in, the current version that they're showing off here, and that might even change before they release the new content on November 5th. Okay, rust breath is one I mentioned earlier. It will make your breath weapon, deal physical damage if they aren't already dealing just physical damage. It will also inflict a guaranteed weakened, a guaranteed sundered defense, and it will dispel all positive status effects on enemies, which is really good. That's really, really good, because there's not a lot of things that can say get rid of an enemy's steadfast. If you can say, hey, I know you were supposed to be able to um, not be able to be removed from the battlefield this turn because steadfast keeps you alive at 1 HP. Let's just remove that and kill off the unit. That has incredible value, I think, specifically against feudal, because they have an AoE that gives steadfast to a lot of units, and uh, that doesn't keep them from taking damage, but it will allow them to stick around and use their abilities at least the next turn. They'll probably get reduced to relatively low HPs regardless, but it's always hard to tell with steadfast and these positive status effects that can be removed but are incredibly powerful. Now we have life breath next, which says that get extra HP, the size of the breath attack, it's going to be bigger. You're going to get some blight damage, but the main thing here is that healing it, the breath itself will heal friendly units that are standing inside of the breath attack uh, cone. And I think it will make it so that you no longer deal damage to those units and you just heal them, which is it's better than just healing. It's almost like saying uh, these guys can stay where they are and not lose 30 HP, not lose 20 HP. They'll actually gain 20 HP, which is almost like healing 40 HP when you think about it that way. On top of that, this will revive friendly dead units with 30% of their HP. Wait a minute. What's the cooldown on this? That sounds incredible. If you got other sources of healing, that's going to be really, really good. Wow. How's that not the best one? It might be the best one. I might be missing something here. But the fact that stormbreath is pretty similar. It does more damage than some of the other ones. It inflicts electrified and it inflicts blind is really neat, because I think the tome of shadows that interacts with the blind debuff quite a bit. So having a source that can apply to a lot of units could be very, very good. But I don't know, man. Reviving, reviving every so many turns. It seems like you should be able to win most fights just by using your life breath. Then again, this is coming off of level 12, so it should be pretty good. Um, let's see, the Master of Affinity. We haven't seen, I think, Master of Chaos signature skills, or the things you can pick if you take the Master of Chaos, and it looks like you can either get this thing, which does a 1 hex radius to give enemies 2 random debuffs with a cooldown of 1. That seems like a very big dice roll. Like I talked about earlier, I think that's great for the Chaos Affinity. Sometimes that'll be really good. Sometimes you'll get insane in a 1 hex radius. Um, Gosh, I think they probably all get the same debuff. So I don't know, like if they get electrified, if that's super valuable, especially if they have a lot of HP. But if they become insane or gilded, that's awesome. That's really, really neat. There are a lot of things that just like pause a unit and take away their action points. So if you get any of those, that's going to be very good value. The Amplify Chaos is the other option you get for Master of Chaos, or when you get to level 12 signature skills, I want to say. Then you can pick things like this. Or is it does it work like that, or is it just affinity focus? It might be actually based on your infinity, not on what level you're at. If you've got enough points, then you may be able to unlock this stuff a little bit earlier. But the dragons, from what I understand, they are less flexible in that regard. They have to go aspect, transformation, breath, then elder. So amplify chaos says this will target all adjacent enemies and remove all negative status effects while dealing 12 fire damage for each negative status effect removed. So if your dragon has a lot of status effects on him, you can fly him around to an enemy, remove a bunch, and deal a bunch of damage at the same time. That seems okay, but not as good as invest in yeah investing in chaos. That is a bigger dice roll, but I think I'd take that dice roll more often. All right, so now we're ready to move on to the options you get when your Dragon Ruler gets to level 16. You can pick the Elder of Astral, which will give you some boosts to your stats. Once again, I think these numbers are likely to change quite a bit. I think Avoxel said that these numbers seemed a little bit low compared to the boost that you were getting on the transformations, but I don't know, maybe it will stay the same. The fact that this gives Wind Barrier is less important than the fact that it gives you a new ability. Wind Barrier is something that's been in the game for a while. You can get it on a ring. I think there are certain units that come with a Wind Barrier that makes a unit harder to hit. But the fact that the dragon is large target means it's going to be relatively easy to target with ranged abilities, and that the reduced accuracy on this is generally less valuable than on a hero, which will be a little bit harder to hit because they don't have the large target tag. Now, the Storm Call ability says that it will displace all adjacent enemies up to 2 hexes, and it's a free action that will apply Electrified for up to 3 turns with cooldown 0. This means that if for some reason your dragon is surrounded by a lot of enemies, you can then use this ability to give him the ability to get to a safe place that also will make it so that the enemies aren't still grouped up together and able to attack the same targets as efficiently. If they're spread out, it's going to be harder for them to get repeating melee attacks and repeating range attacks that have good accuracy. So there are other use cases for this. You can use this to like go into an enemy line and disrupt them, but generally speaking, I think this is probably got more value as a way to reposition and escape the enemy's attacks. Now we have the Elder of Chaos, which works pretty much the same way for the stat boosts. Well, it does work the same way for the stat boost, but it also will make it so that you're immune to fire hazards, as well as kills will grant fires of war until the end of battle. And if I remember correctly, yeah, that I actually have an image here. This will make it so melee attacks gain +2 fire damage per stack, stacks up to 5 times. I think your melee tail swipe, it was something that Avoxel mentioned, should get more than +2 per stack, so that should be +4 per stack, but it wasn't mentioned here in the tooltip. So that could be something that changes, or maybe I'm remembering this wrong. Now, the yeah, they're likely to be higher in the next build. I remember them saying that, and I wrote this down, which means that they probably, I think I can confirm they said that during the stream. The Elder of Order says that all friendly units gain control loss immunity. Seems massive. It seems so much better than what you're getting for the Elder of Chaos and what you're getting for the Elder of Astral, because when things get mind controlled, you lose access to their actions, and the enemy all of a sudden has it's kind of like having more chess pieces on a board in chess. Like that's a pretty big advantage. It doesn't mean you're going to win every time, but it definitely will make it a lot easier for you to win your fights. Just simply by the fact that you should be able to do more damage by having more actions, and then removing enemies will be easier for you, which will kind of snowball that effect and make it so that you can take out the remaining enemies quicker and quicker and quicker, or more easily as the fight goes on. At the start of the turn, all friendly units that are nearby, I think, are going to get something like +10 morale. I'm not sure why this is cut out here. Probably didn't get a good screenshot of it. Yeah, I'm just going to say it's probably like +10 morale. Even without this, this seems very good, very competitive, because control loss immunity is very, very good. Especially on certain units that don't come with it. I think the mythic units, they may have control loss immunity, but the tier 4s aren't all considered mythic, so you want to make sure that they don't get mind controlled. They can do a lot of damage. They can apply a lot of stat effects very quickly. So losing access to those on the turn that you want to use them can be very bad. And then if those stats effects or actions get used against you, it may go on cooldown when you get the unit back under your control. Um, Now, change in heart. This is them showing another ambition change. They could pick Gloryseeker here, which I don't remember seeing in any of the previous dev streams. So we can just take a quick look at what that gives. This will make it so that you can get rank slayer. Does it mean you do more damage against things that have higher ranks? That would be really, really cool. This says that you get ambition from personally slaying a legendary rank unit in combat. Oh, so if you go against other players who have farmed up their guys, you can get a lot of ambition that way. 100 renown and rank slayer is just something you get once, right? Whereas this is repeatable. Personally slay a unit of elite rank in combat shouldn't be too tricky to do in multiplayer either. So I think I generally like this one. This next image is something that you can get when you are picking your rulers. They might be a recruiting governor, which at the first point of renown gives you some draft. The second point makes it so that the units are going to cost less in the city that this ruler is governing, or this hero is governing. And then at renown level 3, you get +1 rank to units that are built in that city. And then at renown level 4, they get another +1 rank to the units built in that city, and that's really good because they did just take a lot of things out of the game that give you those extra boosts to your units right out of the gate as soon as you build them, because they were finding that people were able to get to legendary rank units quite quickly using that strategy, and it was pretty hard to compete against when people just have units at their max rank right out of the cities. Then they get access to the extra stat boosts and their medals, which can make them almost like they are 2 tier higher than they actually are. Like a tier 1 unit can perform as well as a tier 3 unit when the tier 1 unit has maxed out its ranks or its experience, and the tier 3 unit has no ranks or no experience. The next image we have here has to do with this new shuffle hero selection button that is in the bottom right hand screen of hero selection. If you don't like the heroes that the game generates for you, you can, in the version of the game they were playing on, use Imperium to trade these guys out or to see new options here. But it sounds like they're thinking about making it cost gold to do that. And while I understand that it has to cost a resource, so people don't click this button over and over again until they have exactly the right hero for the build that they're trying to go for. I kind of wish it was on a cooldown instead of costing gold or Imperium, because I think that could work pretty much the same way. If you could only click this button once every 5 turns or once every 10 turns, I think that would keep people from just getting exactly what they want out of their heroes. One of the more interesting aspects of the heroes here is you kind of have to adapt your playstyle to the hero. And I think with the new renown bonuses and the way that these guys have classes that make it so that they have to use certain weapon types will lead to more varied gameplay, and that will lead to, I think, me and people who think like me having more fun with Age of Wonders 4 in general. I'm mostly excited to use this in skirmish mod because I we can change those numbers so it doesn't cost any resources, and we just can do it probably as many times as we want with the way the thing is written here. Um, and then after that, I took an image of the duelist trait, which is a thing you can get for completing this guy's ambitions, or the major ambition, I think, is when you get the extra defense and resistance and damage against heroes, which is something that was in game, but it's just been like moved over to here, like a lot of the other things. But they've also introduced some new things, like the rank slayer was, I think, in a similar place to duelist. So duelist says that if you personally say a ruler in combat, then you get the duelist thing, and you get a bunch of renown, which will help you get things kind of like the recruiting hero. I think this duelist thing would feed into, yeah, it would feed into recruiting governor, this thing right here, which is pretty good. And then the minor ambition is just to slay any hero in combat. That's repeatable. That is very, very good, and would combine nicely with this shadow thing that gives you 200 knowledge for killing a hero. So if you have a hero that has this and you have the shadow tree, you probably want to unlock that and start finding heroes to try and take out of the game as quickly as possible. Next, we have some things that are from, I want to say, the warrior tree, but we haven't seen in game until this stream. I don't believe we've seen undying warrior. This says when the unit dies in combat, it is revived at the end of combat. If you're victorious, it basically gives you resurgence. And then brutal parry, which is just down and one more part in the tree. So if you take this, I think you could have access to brutal parry. This says attackers within 1 hex suffer 5 physical damage and have 50% of suffering bleeding for 3 turns. So when an attacker attacks you within 1 hex, then they're gonna take damage. So I think range attacks won't lead to parrying, but like basically melee attacks or somebody who uses a ranged attack next to you, maybe from a flanking position, that would allow you to apply bleeding and 5 physical damage. This seems very like weak compared to some of the other things that we've seen this far down the tree. Maybe I'm missing something, but you can let me know in the comment section if you agree. Yeah, I think greater vigor, just having 30 more hit points on your person seems better, and it is something you have access to earlier on in the tree. Um, and then debilitating aura, I think, was something that I saw earlier in the stream, but we didn't have a screenshot for exactly what it does. It makes it so adjacent enemies have -5 status resistance. That's a lot. That's a lot of status resistance to reduce an enemy by. So you can use your heroes as kind of like a moving way to like apply buffs more easily. Pretty cool, and you think about it that way. I don't believe we saw Dark Ritual underneath the Ritualist class, but it makes sense that Dark Ritual would be in the Ritualist class tree, and it is here on the right, as you would probably expect it to be. It's in the path that has to do with necromancy and the undead, and from what I can tell, I think this is pretty unchanged. 1 hex radius raises decaying zombies if there are corpses. If not, you can just use this to try and do a little bit more damage. The AI loves to use it to deal damage, but the main thing here is that you're trying to raise a bunch of undead zombies to overwhelm the enemy. So I think it's pretty good in general. All right, so I think we're ready to now start diving into the screenshots I have for the Ranger class and the skills that you can put on the heroes with the Ranger class. The right side of this tree is stuff that's more associated with the skirmisher weapons and those types of interactions, whereas I think the stuff on the left is more of your traditional or typical ranged attacks and abilities, and this little narrow path in the middle I think is just general stat boost. Like if I remember correctly, the shield with a 2 on it should just give you a little bit more defense. Now I remember they were very excited to tell us about the critical skirmisher ability that which appears later in the tree because of how much damage a unit could theoretically do if they're able to stack up this modifier enough. This says basically when a hero does a crit, the next crit will deal an extra 10% damage, and this will stack up to 5 times. So if you're able to get pretty decent crit chance, and if you're able to boost the crit damage on your heroes, this can allow your like mage lock rifle heroes to do a lot of damage, like 80, 90, 100 damage if you stack enough stuff on it. And then even without that, it should just allow you to do a lot of damage across the board with other weapon types. The next thing we have here is melee training, which is, yeah, it's the first pick in the skirmisher path here, and this will make it so that melee attacks now inflict sundered defense, and that this will be increased for non-repeating attacks. I have to assume that means that you would apply 2 sundered defense for a single charge attack or something like the quick stab here, because it's not a repeating attack. Now we have something called Go for the Kill, which appeared pretty late in the tree. I think this is the capstone at the very bottom here. This says melee and physical attacks deal plus 50% damage until the end of the current turn. So as you can imagine, that plus not melee training, but critical skirmisher and maybe killing momentum, because I think there could be killing momentum somewhere in this tree here, or maybe you can put it on your unit using an item, because I think there used to be a way to do that. Then you can do a lot of damage, not just across the board, but in one turn. You can use a single action attack to kill an enemy. Then maybe if you're lucky, you might be able to kill another enemy with the single action attack you get from killing momentum. And that type of interaction will be better with skills like this that are going to last until the end of the current turn or the tactical turn. This cannot be used in enemy zone of control, can only be used once per battle, are important qualifications. It looks like it's something that would work in water. There's a lot of things that don't work in water, so that's good to see that it's generally not too tricky to use. The main thing is that you want to not be in zone of control with an enemy. So this isn't for um, melee attacks too much, because you're going to be in zone of control. If you want to do 3 attacks, you're going to be starting off in zone of control, and I wouldn't really want to use this on a turn where I only get 2 repeating melee attacks, or I'm not really sure if this class has access to many things that would do a single action attack. I guess a ranger would be able to use the crossbow and the mage lock rifle, uh, so that's probably the best value out of that you can get out of Go for the Kill. The new scattershot ability looks pretty interesting. From what I remember them saying on stream, the scattershot, true shot, and snapshot are going to be independent of the weapon that you have equipped. So this guy will do 19 damage unless you can boost it through things that will just give you plus 10% more ranged damage. But generally speaking, this is going to do a 1 hex AoE, which you cannot use in enemy zone of control and has a cooldown of 2 turns. When we compare that to the true shot, this also cannot be used with a enemy in zone of control. It has a cooldown of 2, it has a range of 6, but the true shot does a lot of damage on a single target, whereas the scatter shot will allow you to spread that across more units. And if they are clustered up, if a lot of enemies are clustered up, you in theory should be able to get more damage out of the scatter shot, and it should be a little bit easier to get to hit units, because when you got a thing that hits in a 1 hex radius, you can actually hit things that are 7 range away from you. You won't be able to hit a lot of units that are 7 away from you, but you should be able to hit one that's 7 away from you by targeting one in front of that enemy. The last one we haven't really taken a look at is Snapshot, and this one is quite a bit different from True Shot and Scattershot in that it is a free action. It has less range. It is range 4, whereas this one is, I think, base range 6, and this one is base range 6. You might be able to boost that range, kind of like how I talked about how you can boost the damage. I think there should be something in here somewhere that allows you to attack from a little bit further away. That would make sense for rangers. But yeah, the other thing about Snapshot is this is affected by line of sight rules, and it has a shorter cooldown. It's something that you can use more frequently and has no action points associated with it. So it might be the best one, but it is a little bit trickier to use because you have to get closer to the enemy, putting your hero in danger. But then once you're there, you're going to be able to deal quite a bit of damage fairly consistently, regularly. Regularly? Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. Miasma shot is something that you can put on. Um, you can get true shot and scatter shot to leave afflicting miasma and apply weaken to targets in a 1 hex radius. So once again, this doesn't apply to the not true shot or scatter shot, but rather it doesn't apply to snapshot. Snapshot wouldn't be able to get this miasma, but it would be a good way to apply miasma in an AoE. Generally, when you're applying things like miasma, putting it in 1 hex isn't a lot of value, but putting it on in an area will make it so that the enemy has to really consider, do I take the weakened and just walk towards the enemy efficiently, or do I need to waste my action points and walk around inefficiently? Now, um, you can either pick this miasma shot or piercing shot. I think if you take either true shot or scatter shot, you basically have these two options available at the next level up, or you could like end up going down an entirely different path. But piercing shot will make it so that these both the true shot and the scatter shot can now bypass 50% of the target's defense and resistance, which will allow you to deal with higher tier units more efficiently. Generally, bypassing 50% of 1 armor or 2 armor isn't that much value, but being able to bypass 7 armor or 10 armor or 14 armor is a lot of value. That will allow you to deal, um, I want to say almost double damage, but I don't know the exact math here. I think it might be close to double damage on these types of attacks here. Now, Swarm Hunter is something that comes into play later in the tree, and this says that attacks will deal +1 physical damage for each enemy adjacent to the target. So if you're attacking an enemy that's surrounded by other enemies and maybe even friendlies, it looks like, then you can end up just dealing a little bit more damage to that target that you're trying to attack. These effects are increased for non-repeating attacks, so you can get +2 if you're using the mage lock rifle instead of like a repeating archer. The big game hunter says that range attacks now deal +1 physical damage for each unit tier of the target, which is really, really good if you're fighting either tier 5 units or heroes. Heroes are going to be a little bit more common and occur earlier in the game, so this might be more for countering heroes because you'll get not +1 here, but I want to say +5 on repeating attacks, so maybe potentially 15 more physical damage. Or if you've got a single action attack, that'll be +10, which if you've got breaching, that could actually work out to being more damage than the 15. Kind of depends on the unit you're attacking, how much armor and resistance they have, and what tier they are, or if you're dealing with a situation where there's just going to be a lot of units like the necromancers, then maybe swarm hunter will end up being more value. The next one we have here is opening strikes, and that comes into play very late in the tree here. I didn't get a great screenshot of it, but I did get that it says melee attacks now deal up to +50% extra damage. This bonus is reduced as the target's health goes down, I think. So basically you want to use this at the beginning of a fight. And using melee strikes at the beginning of a fight is risky, but you can try and do that if you want to. This next image I find really interesting, not because it has a returning character from a previous Age of Wonders game. I think Xorn was in Age of Wonders 3 and now he's in Age of Wonders 4. But the reason I find this really interesting is because it seems like they're adding descriptions for all of the custom rulers that we have in Age of Wonders 4. We should be able to see things like this little blurb, which tells us that basically this guy is a mercenary who was hired by the Elven court on Athla to help deal with the umbral demons and the eldritch sovereigns. But there's also going to be more information about like Nemu and Tempest and all those other rulers, which I think is going to be great not only for new players who don't know who these people are, but for people who are big fans of the franchise but have forgotten a lot of the characters that were in previous ones. Now, the Sword Slayer, I think, is a Pantheon item. This is another new ruler. What's his name exactly? We can zoom in here. I can't. I'm not sure how to say that. It says something like Yulang, and yeah, this oh, Waku. I thought it was a D for some reason. Okay, it looks like it's like Waku Yulang is going to be using a Pantheon weapon. This one gives fatal strikes, which increases damage as the target loses health up to 50%. It's kind of like the opposite of the opening strikes that we looked at not too long ago, and I believe the shade units have a similar interaction. So this is kind of like bringing that interaction to a different weapon type, a charge weapon, because the shades are not charge units. They are, I think, skirmishers. Tom also mentioned that there is a change in the way the Pantheon weapons like the crowbow work, and I think the Direcaster staff will work differently too. Now the crowbow summon is attached to the weapon, but you can make better weapons than the starting tier ones using the new blueprint system in the item forge. At least that's how it sounds like this should work in the version of the game we're getting on November 5th. There is going to be a new sword and crossbow weapon available to 3 cultures, feudal, high, and dark. At least that's what they said. We didn't actually get to see this. This should be in the item forge. It should have 1 more range, slightly more damage, and doesn't have breaching when you compare it to the pistol and sword skirmisher weapons that they introduced. I think in Empires and Ashes, that's kind of like the thing that the dragoons have, and you can put on a lot of heroes to turn them into skirmishers, to turn them into quite efficient skirmishers too. Voxel said that he wants to look into improving non-Pantheon weapon starts to be more in line with the new content, but he hasn't gone around to that yet. He was focused on other things, like I think the hero rework and the way those level ups. I believe that's where Voxel spent most of his time and energy um, on this content pack. Now we have a couple more screenshots from the Pantheon tree. Like you can get this cosmetic, the sealed blessed dragon spine for your dragon rulers, and the esoteric dragon head. These are off to the side because it is new content that is associated only with these DLCs. I think they've built them into the other trees in the past, but they wanted to keep these cosmetic ones off to the side for one reason or another. Maybe I'm forgetting some details, and if you know what they are, please feel free to let people know in the comments section below. You can also get the Eldritch Ogre head here and the Eldritch Guardian head for your sovereigns. You can change the cosmetics a little bit for the dragons using these 2 picks, and you can change the cosmetics for the Eldritch sovereigns using these 2 cosmetic picks over here on the right side of the Pantheon tree, or the Pantheon rewards. We're also going to get the Martial Cestus Hero Origin, which, like the Crowbow, does something extra. It gives you this ability to leap kind of like a monk unit, and like with the crowbow, you should be able to put this leap ability onto better weapons using the item forge. The next 2 screenshots I have here have to do with signature skills and the, I want to say, initiate of astral. The warding aura just gives you a little bit of extra resistance on adjacent friendly units, and the lightning strikes makes it so that your base attacks do a little bit of lightning and you deal extra damage against targets that are electrified. After that, we got some images that have to do with crafting the claw weapons. You can now craft charge claws that work like the charge weapons. This is a single action attack that does more damage if you travel further. And then we also got access to claws that now have defense mode. So this is kind of like the equivalent of sword and shield gear or heroes. Now you're going to have a special defense mode that will keep your dragon a little bit safer. The trade-off is that you deal slightly less damage. I think base claws usually deal 18 repeating damage, whereas these armored claws do 14 repeating damage at tier 1. And of course, you can make them higher tier so that they would deal more damage. If you take the cosmic weapon as an Eldritch Sovereign, that will turn your Eldritch Sovereign into a mage. And I believe there is 1 ritualist choice and 2 mage choices for the Eldritch Sovereigns. That's what Tom said near the end of the stream, but we didn't actually get to see that. Astral Siphon, I think, is a little is unchanged, but the neat thing about Astral Siphon is that it can be acquired pretty early in your level up tree. All you need is 1 more thing before it, and the Mage Bane is something that you only need 2 more picks before, but of course you do need the Wizard's Tower Apex, so I think that will be a bigger limiting factor for getting the Mage Bane than unlocking it in this tree, but I don't know, maybe there's something I'm missing with the level up system here. The Ascension Deep Collar is, I think, just a screenshot showing that if you have ascended traits, they're going to be shown in the left side of the um, in the tree here of the skills that you can pick when you're leveling up your hero. And yeah, that's the last one I have for you. If you feel like there's anything important that I missed, or if you wanted to add anything, please feel free to use the comment section below. I'll see you around. Have a good one.